wake up. It's time to do our podcast. We almost slept through it.
Let me sit up.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's podcast time.
Yeah, we got to do our podcast today. Do we have any stories to tell about this?
So, you remember that Mad About You episode? So, this is a sitcom from the early 1990s with Paul Reiser and Helen Hunt. They were Paul and Jamie Buckman, just a young couple and living in New York City in their adventures. And Paul goes into for a sleep study. He's having trouble sleeping at night and he doesn't know why. So he goes to the sleep clinic and they do a sleep study and they can't find anything. And eventually they're like, "Wait, maybe we need to do it at home, in your natural environment." Or they bring Jamie in. Maybe they bring Jamie into the clinic so that it's just like how he would normally sleep. And so they bring her in and only to find out the reason Paul's having trouble sleeping is Jamie's sleep beating him up.
So I found the sleep study.
So it's kind of funny because, he thinks he's having trouble sleeping only to discover that she's beating
And she's
on
really,
him.
really beating him up too. It wasn't just a plaything. It was ah,
So this
well,
is Gina.
and this is Don on this sleepy afternoon. And this
Why
is,
don't why don't you sit up, Don?
I guess I can, and this is podcast number 183. And today we're talking about, and I'm calling it sleep tight, maybe not.
Sleep
And we're going to
tight,
be
maybe
talking
not.
about sleep issues and about
Bef-
seniors dealing with sleep issues. And
Before we get into that, I got a few jokes.
okay,
Um, Shoot, where'd my jokes go? Hey, Don, do you know why I stay up late on weekends?
besides work, no.
Because sleep is for the weak.
Okay,
What's huge and gray and sends people to sleep?
gray and sends people to sleep. I don't know.
A hypnopotamus.
Is there a third one, or it sounds like you have a third one in my
Um,
line there?
what should you do if you can't get to sleep?
I don't know. What can you do if you can't get to sleep?
Lie on the edge of the bed. You'll soon drop off.
They're kind of corny, but they're good. Ah,
So
so
what are the tips for today?
well, we'll be going through quite a bit of tips at the end. I thought about there's a lot of tips I found on this website. I'll give one of them now, and then we can do the rest later. And the first one is pretty simple if people can really think about it, is doing more exercise. If you want to, I think getting our body toned in a good shape, it not only fits our look and all, but it fits how we sleep and how we act in our life. So exercise is a big part of that.
Yeah, having enough activity. Um,
So your sleep, we can get exhausted, but I think there's a difference between getting exhausted just from being tired or whatever, but I think there's an exhaustion that you get when you do exercises and really work your body, you really work up to that sleep. I don't know if that's the right way to put it,
think
but
about young children and you go out, you do some activity with them, and they're out all day and you're like, oh, they're going to sleep good tonight. You kind of wear
yeah,
them out. A dog, you take him for a long walk and he runs around the park and you come home and he tuckers out asleep. So yeah, there's something to be said about our activity level. And as adults, we often sit a whole lot. Um,
yeah.
so many
And
jobs are very sedentary.
well, like I say, sitting around and getting tired from that's one thing. I mean, we do get that because we're exhausted from not sleeping well the day before, or whatever. But like you say, when we work ourselves, like you say, when you're taking the child outside, or when you're taking yourself out and getting yourself busy doing things, you'll fall asleep much faster. So, what kind of stuff did you find in your?
So from Harvard Medical School, the Division of Sleep Medicine, I found it's more than an article, it's a whole section about a sleep and health education program. Um, shoot. Um, and I'm not at the page that I was at before when I was researching this. Okay.
Oh no.
So now I'm there. So there's just a whole different um why sleep matters. When we miss sleep, we pay the price to our own health, our safety, and our quality of life. Um, Even without fully grasping what sleep does for us, we know that going without sleep for too long makes us feel terrible, and that getting a good night's sleep can help us to feel ready to take on the world. So, scientists have done a lot of studying over the years um, in sleep and how it affects us. Science of sleep. Let's see. There was a whole section in here about the history of sleep. And I had it all right here in front of me, and now I can't find it.
Well, I can talk a little bit about what I found while you search for it. One,
Okay.
I,
Oh, there it
I,
is.
I I found that this, they call it the circadian um,
Circadian rhythms.
rhythm. I always thought it was just about sleep. I thought it was just about getting, um, but there's this. I have to read because the description of it is the suprachiasmatic nucleus controls the circadian rhythm, and it's not only about getting your sleep enough. Circadian also tells you when to get hungry. It also regulates your hormones like melatonin, cortisols, and things like that. So it does a lot more than I ever thought it would do, from what I'd read. And, so we think about fight or flight, and that kicks up cortisols. And we really need to have the melatonin and the serotonins and things like that kick in. And that plays a big part in that. That's part of what we do when we bring down anxiety. Um,
Um,
Anyway, what did you find in your search again?
so what I found interesting is there's a historical perspective of sleep, kind of a cultural and historical perspective, and there's a timeline, and it starts with get this to scroll. It starts with it's a timeline history dating. All right, so the ancient civilization. So we're dating back to 800 to 600 BC. Ideas about sleep occupy the conscious thoughts of ancient people. The rishis of India, who created some of the earliest philosophies in human history, describe states of waking consciousness and dreaming. The ancient Egyptians built temples to the goddess Isis, where devotees met the priestess to engage in early form of hypnosis and dream interpretation. The Greeks and Romans have powerful sleep deities such as Hypnos, Somnus, and Morpheus, who are thought to be the source of any human element occurring in dreams. And sleep is often compared to death, as in the ancient Chinese proverb attributed to Lao Tzu, he holds nothing back from life, therefore he is ready for death, as a man is ready for sleep after a good day's work. And you kind of can jump through history on this timeline, and it talks about the age of enlightenment from 1600 to 1799. um, and they begin to debate, what is the source, what is the cause of sleep. Shoot, I just hit back. What is the cause of sleep? I don't think I got enough sleep last night. um, dream interpretation, in the early 1600s, scientists began to keep a daily record of their own dreams. Sleep is often less intellectual exercise and more an exercise in futility. Um, so they just talk about, the history of what they felt sleep was about. They, for a while they didn't understand what caused sleep. They thought it was a lack of oxygen and change in the chemicals in our body that caused us to fall asleep. It wasn't until I think the early 1900s when they had new technology and instruments to do a little bit more scientific research on sleep that they began to understand the neurological research showed began to show the explanations of sleep and they be able to refute the previous explanations where they thought that sleep was brought on by gases produced in the intestines during digestion or by a decrease in stimuli that went down when the sun went down. Um, and then understanding how the brain has an effect. And there is something to the sun going down. You think back to people used to go, work in the fields at sunrise to sunset. So our body naturally produces melatonin. It's been People now think of melatonin as a supplement you take to help you sleep,
Yeah.
yet it naturally occurs in the body.
Mhm.
And it has to do with the light, as the light daylight is reducing and the amount of light that we're getting into our brain, it is producing melatonin that helps us to go to sleep. And so the challenges of modern day living is we have lights and we can stay on the computer and have this continuous visual stimulation and to keep us up and affect our sleep cycles.
Yeah, I read something a long time ago about the that we went from y- I think even from like going from like candlelit reading to like, the electricity coming into the house really started to change kind of the way we do our whole sleep cycle and the way we do our work. Um, but they talk about, we was talking about the circadian rhythm, and they talk about it, as you get older, it, you actually have what they call it the phase advancement. Your circadian shifts goes backwards. I call it backwards. They talk about moving forward. In other words, you get sleepy much earlier in life and wake up much earlier. And it's kind of part of growing older. But and we see this all the time. Your dad used to fall asleep kind of pretty early in the evening. And
And be wide awake at 4 or 5 a.m. There's also, you talk about infants, they sleep 20 hours a day. As they get older, their amount of sleep is more like 12, and then, 8 to 10 through the teen years. And then it says as adults, typically 7 hours of sleep is enough. And then once we get past age 65, a lot of times there is like a mosquito flying in front of the screen. We need less sleep. And again, this is different for different people as far as amount of sleep that we need to feel rested. Um,
well, they talk about in this article I read that was they kind of put it as a little bit of a myth that we need less sleep as we get older. So I'm not. It's I don't know. I mean, I've always been pretty much 6 hours has been kind of my not my limit, but it's been kind of what I've built myself on all my life, and it hasn't changed. It doesn't seem to have changed as much when I got older. I don't know.
one thing I was reading about is that when we're younger, we stay up late, we push ourselves, but then we have to get up early. So we're not getting the amount of sleep we really need. And so then we're tired versus when we're older, we can go to sleep in a more natural um,
I guess because are you talking about
You
like
don't,
if
we
we've
don't have,
retired or
yeah,
that
you
we
don't have the pressures of having to get up for, particular reason, and that you often are,
well they
um,
talk about here in retirement though the problem with that shift and with some of the other stuff we sometimes change our way of we try to change our rhythm you know and we don't keep it in very good balance. They really talk about setting a time and following that time throughout even as you get older.
yeah,
So
all the studies and things. I know one of our kids went to a sleep doctor. They had trouble with sleep, and there was a lot of regimen. Going to sleep at the same time, waking up at the same time to help your body have that rhythm. I know they also talked about only sleeping in the bed, not sitting there doing homework or, other things
yeah.
to keep the bed as a place you sleep. There were enough number of different things. And I think it really helped our child. They didn't like how early was recommended going to bed, but there is something to be said about the rhythm of that and feeling rested.
So and
Um,
they talk about we you and I talked about naps, and they most of the time it reads that naps, short naps. I think what they if they mentioned somewhere between like 20 minutes and a half hour is considered a good short nap, but going any longer than that can I think mess up the circadian rhythm, but mess up your nighttime sleeping, all of that.
well, if you sleep longer than that, you go into more of a deep sleep. And when you wake up from a deep sleep, you're more disoriented and groggy. Taking that little 15, 20-minute power nap that's more of a light sleep can help you feel refreshed and recharged. But if you go past that, you're more likely to go into deeper sleep. Think about if you wake up and you were in the middle of deep sleep, it kind of really throws you off versus that waking up naturally when you come out of, our body has that rhythm of light sleep and deep sleep, and it kind of goes in waves throughout the night. And when we wake up naturally as we're coming out of the deep sleep, we often feel maybe a little more rested or not that suddenness. Think about trying to wake your kids up. Um, and if they're in the middle of deep sleep, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then they fall, they're not fully awake yet. So it makes a difference. The science of sleep, it talks about what is sleep, and it talks about that there's been 50 years of research on brain activity, physiological patterns that has helped to understand a great deal of what sleep is and what sleep isn't. Um,
You're still
um,
trying to scroll.
the changes in depth and definition of sleep, sleep patterns, characteristic of sleep, natural patterns of sleep, talking about sleep labs, sleep studies. Um, this talks about sleep and aging. Um, Depending on our ability and opportunity to sleep, we may not always get the sleep we require. As we age and undergo a variety of developmental changes, our sleep patterns can change as well. Um,
Well,
so
there's a whole list, and I can go through them. But one of the interesting ones I found was there's one called REM sleep behavior disorder, and they talk about most people they don't move when they sleep, and we kind of it kind of brings up the mad about you thing, but this REM sleep behavior disorder, people act out their dreams. They literally move
it's
around. They do
common
the
in Parkinson's.
Oh, is it really?
Yes, yes. My dad used to do that a whole lot.
Actually physically do the different things he needs to do and move around and stuff like that. Huh.
Yeah, that's
But
he was having issues with falling out of bed.
okay. Um, the other
Well,
things, go ahead.
I just on that note, sleepwalking, sleep talking, sleep terrors. I know when our oldest was young, he'd wake up in the middle of the night screaming, and he was sleeping on it was a regular bed. It was low though, and he'd climbing the walls, and
Oh.
kind of screaming out, and we had to kind of wake him up and get him back asleep. He also did some sleepwalking. One time he came down, we didn't know he was really asleep and coming
I
down the
forgot about that.
stairs, and we had to turn him back around and tell him to go back up to bed. Um, and my sister tells a story of she had a sleepover with friends, so I was less than 9, and they're in the living room goofing around, and here I walk and I'm trying to go to the front door and I'm trying to exit, and apparently I was sleepwalking and I kind of startled and scared them. Um,
Well, my brother Vern used to. I don't know if he still does it. I doubt it probably at this age, but when we was younger, one time I came home. I came home from a date. Like I think it was like 1 o'clock or something like that, and he had moved back in after that. I think that was after my father died, and he was sleeping at the room right there by the living room. And I came home, and as I came out, he came around the corner from the room, and he stood there, and he was like, got down kind of in this, I don't know if what I'd call it, like a kung fu kind of fight, and said, "You stop right there," and I'm like, Vern, I'm trying to wake him up, and he's like wanting to almost attack me, and I finally did wake him up, and got him back to bed, but that was one of his many different adventures out that he did.
so you'd kind of gotten to know that he often
Yeah.
walked in his sleep, and so you were kind of, I imagine the first time it was quite startling, but
A lot of that my mom handled, I guess when he was younger or something like that. But I just remember a couple of different times, and a couple of times I won't mention because the things he did was not very fun. Um, so we won't go into that. But yeah, I get the sleepwalking thing, and I don't know if there's anything that really you didn't look up anything as how what kind of if there's something that caught. I guess it'd be that sleep disorder kind of behavior.
yeah, I actually, I didn't look into it. I wanted to circle back around. We talked about as we get older, do we need as much sleep? And what I'm reading here is we often still need amount of sleep, but because of biological changes, having to go to the bathroom more frequently, we're
Mm.
not necessarily getting it in the
Oh,
full block of time. And they talk about napping can be helpful as people are older, to get that extra sleep in. Again, though, they continuously talk about those 15 to 20-minute naps.
yeah, and that doesn't seem like that helps.
And it, according to this, it says it would help. Yet if you're getting interrupted sleep, so are you, eh, but how helpful is that? Yet there's a lot of information and research out there. We can share these links to the information we found. The history of sleep is kind of interesting. The timeline that I talked about, because you just click on each time period and it gives kind of an overview, and that's just kind of fun to look at that and understand things. There's so many different components of sleep, and as we know, as parents raising children, we don't get the sleep that we're used to because we're helping our children with sleeping, and if their sleep disturbances are affecting us and our ability to sleep. And when we're older and busier, if we're juggling multiple things like in the sandwich generation, caring for aging parents, managing our own job, and still caring for kids, maybe they're in school, our time factor affects our sleep. We stay up late to get extra work done or something that we have to do, and then we have to get up early to make lunches for people and get things ready for the day. If we have commutes, that cuts into that time that we have to get up extra early to be able to drive the distance we need to get to work. I know, Don, you wake up extra early because you have a very long commute to your office. And
To my office. My office is in the other room.
that was a joke, Don.
I was wondering, I mean, there was if I go to the office, if I really get to the office, then yeah, it's an hour-long drive, but I don't do that
We
anymore.
used to joke at our old house, your office was down in the basement, and you'd eat your breakfast in the kitchen. You'd be like, okay, we'll see what traffic's like going to work as you walk down the stairs, yeah. Passing cats along your way. Um, so all these different factors Uh,
when they have to think about like sleep apnea, they talked about because there's they actually divided into two, just sleep apnea, whereas there's some loss in like breathing, sometimes people would stop breathing, things like that. And then they talk about obstructive sleep apnea, where it gets so bad that the little airways will either collapse or reduce down in size so that you can't breathe as well. So um, that's something that we all have to think about as we get older too, is making sure that that's not an issue in our world. And we talked about the urination and all that. We've been through that and the pain, when uh, you just regular pain as you get older, let alone if you like one time, I messed up my shoulder and that was extra pain that I had to deal with. Um, but so I guess what we unless you have something else, I talk about the tips that they put out there.
Oh yeah, I've got some tips here too, so we can bounce
Okay.
back and forth on our tips.
Well, since I already gave one, you go
Avoiding
first.
caffeine, alcohol, nicotine, and other chemicals that interfere with sleep. And I talk about caffeine is a stimulant. So cutting off the time of day that you take these substances, if you have a lot of difficulty, really reducing the amount. People often think alcohol is a sedative, but it's really not. It's a stimulant. And it really contributes to poor quality of sleep. It increases the number of awakenings generally during your sleep. Um,
Yeah, because there's a big difference in, getting a good deep sleep versus just like you say, that up and down constantly doesn't help any. Um, they talk about reducing bedroom distractions, and there's, television, there's computers, there's well, you could if you really want. I just had a client that had electrical issues. They didn't realize it until they really got into it, but and he literally turns his electricity off at night,
wow.
and he says he now sleeps so much better
He
than he's
shuts the
ever.
power off to the house?
Yeah,
Wow. How,
and that
how did the refrigerator survive?
I don't know. I did, I it might be he might have shut it off to the bedroom. I don't know. He didn't go into full detail about it, but he was saying that there was a lot of buzz going on in his head, and that was one of the problems with it.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of watch that too. Like we talked about things plugged in, you know, even moving. Like I need to like even think about moving the clock's not too close, but having it across the way instead of right next to me. I talked to a lot of people. They don't like to think about the idea of turning your phone off onto air. What do they call
Air,
it?
airplane mode.
Yeah, and how much that can radiate different things to the work to yourself through, and it doesn't have to. It can be quite a distance away, but the more you can do that kind of stuff, it can really help cut back on what your sleep issues are going on.
Yeah, this talks about turning your bedroom into a sleep-inducing environment, a dark, cool environment to help you sleep. Using something like a sound machine where you have white noise. Now you can pull an app up on your phone, but they make specific sound machines that will play ocean waves, different sounds, rain sounds. We kind of alternate between those sounds. We play it on our Google Home now. We used to have an actual sound machine. It's also helpful. Someone sleeping in the next room, playing it there or playing it outside the door so that any noise you're making doesn't disturb them. I know you see this often if you go into a therapist office where there's multiple therapists there, they'll put these on the outside for privacy. Um,
Well,
um,
then set. Oh,
yep,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was going to say setting up kind of a bedtime routine, which you kind of talked about. Doing the warm bath or the shower, like you said, reading, um, doing some kind of meditation before you go to bed, taking some time to do that. Of course, you can always do EFT. and calm yourself that way.
Yes,
Uh,
you can. It talks about avoiding stressful, stimulating activities, doing work, discussing emotional issues. Physically and psychologically stressful activities can cause the body to secrete the stress hormone cortisol, which is associated with increased alertness, and it tends to have cause problems with going to bed and going to sleep at night.
well, I think the other thing I wrote, now those suggestions were really what I came up with. They didn't go through into too much of that routine, but the other thing I thought about is what I call the dump journal. You and I think, talked about this before, but if you got these thoughts racing through your head, um, it's an opportunity to literally write them down and then be able to, and you could, I a lot of times will use the EFT to kind of, okay, mind, I've put these aside. I can pick them up anytime. I don't need to keep them flowing through my head and be able to kind of work your way down with that.
So keeping that journal by your bedside table. So yeah, you can ramble it all out if it's running through your head. Sometimes it helps to get it out on paper to kind of release it. And if you remember when our um, children were younger, I guess pretty young, we had a whole tapping sleeper
Oh my
that we
God, yeah.
did, and it involved sleep well, wake well. And I guess it was about the time our middle child was 7, 8, 9, because then when you had your heart attack, we did this tapping every night. And we included healing daddy's body, because you were in the hospital recovering. And um, with obsessive compulsive disorder, can become like we have to do this, we have to say these certain
Yeah.
things when we're tapping, and yet it's still effective as a calming mechanism. Um, I know you've talked about that before when you talk about tapping and obsessive compulsive disorder, that it can become its own obsession, so to speak,
Mm,
and yet the benefits of the tapping on the meridians can be helpful and
mhm,
calming. There's so many different modalities that we can use between meditation, Reiki, EFT. There's so many more that can be calming, and as a way of quieting our mind and reducing that stress and anxiety.
well, the one of the thing they the last thing they talk about here in the kind of the tips part was keeping the bedroom safe, and they don't really go through it, but I thought this would probably be something you could probably, because it's really about the whole house being safe, but especially in your bedroom, you know, uh, things like watching out for rugs on the floor that could cause tripping, you know, cords hanging out, which we've got some of them hanging out ourselves. Um, Other types of furniture, being careful. Like we even have a corner of a table right here which got kind of an edge on it that if we fell out of bed, which I don't think I'm going to have happen, but we have to watch for those kind of things too in what we do to keep the safe place for us to be able to move around if we need to go to the bathroom and get up. They talk about keeping a light next to the bed. Um, they talk about keeping a phone. This was an interesting one, is keeping the phone next to the bed, which is kind of because I think, I don't know what the majority of people now still have regular phone, line phones. Everybody's pretty much got their cell phone. So, but I think if I'm not mistaken, with the phone, it can still, even if you have it on silence or safe mode, you can still dial like 911 if you need to. I'm not, I'd have to look that up. I didn't think
Yeah,
about
I'm
that.
pretty sure even most cell phones, even if you're not connected to a service, you can still dial 911. Um, but check that out. Yeah, thinking about sleep as we're aging, if you're caring for an elderly person or looking out for their needs, unfortunately, getting up and going to the bathroom in the middle of the night is often a cause of falls
Oh my God, yeah.
for many reasons. You're groggy, you're sleepy, the lighting is poor, tripping on something, walking in your bare feet or slippers, depending on the surface of your floor. Um, and then So yeah, having low lighting, so a really soft, low light can be helpful so that it's not pitch black, especially if you know, where the bathroom's at, and that to give you a little bit of a pathway to get there. The throw rugs and other things on the floor can be tripping hazards. The other thing is if we're waking up and we're rushing because we got to get to the bathroom, which our bladder control can be challenging as we get older. And if we wake up and we really have to go, you're jumping up out of bed quickly. You can have some dizziness from getting up too fast. There can be a lot of factors um, that go into getting to the bathroom safely at night. If your loved one has a walker, even if they don't use it all the time, having it right there by the bedside is an excellent way to give some extra support. Um, I often tell people as they're working towards weaning off, something like a walker, maybe after an injury, is still using it at night going to the bathroom, having that bit of support. The other thing is if someone's living alone, having a either your cell phone, if they use a walker or something, having a bag where it's attached to it and connected to it, because if you go in the bathroom and you fall and your phone's in the other room, you're not going to be able
That's
to
true.
contact somebody. And that's where those life alerts and different call buttons that people wear can be so helpful, because it's something they wear for people who are more up to date with modern technology, wearing a watch that detects a fall. I know that there's pendants that they use where I currently work, and if it hits the floor, it goes off, and someone comes on and says, we detected a fall. Do you need 911? There's a company that monitors that. So having a way for people to call out for help and having a system in place. Um, because often if people have these pendants, they take them off in the bathroom, they take them off to shower, they don't have them on at night. So having something within reach and thinking about, can I get to it if I'm on the floor?
Well, cool. I think I've got myself kind of finished up with what I've researched. So um, I guess just kind of thinking about what we've kind of talked about is we hit a little bit on the history, kind of figure out I was interesting about the history is I didn't really think about them thinking about some of this stuff, thinking about dreaming. I just don't think about that. I think, oh, it's all in the modern age where we got this, but they've been dreaming about this and thinking about this for many, many years beyond us.
And
Um,
understanding it. There's a few more tips here on my article.
okay.
Um, it says, don't be a nighttime clock watcher, staring at your clock in your bedroom. If you're having difficulty falling asleep, turn away from the clock. Don't be staring at the clock.
Just gets you
Um,
mad.
if you can't fall asleep in about 20 minutes, get up and engage in a quiet activity like reading or listening to light music, but using dim lights and then returning to bed. Using light to your advantage, natural light helps keep your internal clock healthy with your sleep wake cycle. They talk about a consistent sleep schedule, as we've touched on. Um, and then it says nap early or not at all. It says if you're going to take a nap, you need to take it earlier in the day, before 5 p.m. for sure. Um, Lighten up on evening meals. They talk about not eating a heavy meal close to bedtime. We think about in some other European countries, they eat their big meal in the middle of the day. And they might even take a nap then, and they eat something lighter in the evening. Um, Balance your fluid intake, drinking enough water so that you don't wake up thirsty. But if you're drinking a lot of water right before bed, then it can cause you to wake up to go to the bathroom. So thinking about getting that water intake earlier in the day. Exercising early. So you don't want to be exercising right before you're going to bed. Says trying to finish your exercise at least 3 hours before bedtime or work out earlier in the day. And following through on these sleep routines to because there's so many different things like restless leg syndrome, sleep apnea, narcolepsy. If you're having other issues beyond this, it's seeking assistance and finding usually a neurologist, someone who specializes in sleep disorders and sleep studies to work with to help you with your sleep because there can be multiple contributing factors.
So something to think about as we all start to age out some here, and we want to think about how we can use those tips that it gives to actually kind of help us to increase our ability to sleep and sleep um, with good function. Is that a good way to put it? I don't know.
Getting a good restful night's sleep so that we can function well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because you can sleep and not feel rested in the morning. And there's so many different factors. We didn't even touch on how excessive sleep can be a sign of depression. Um, there's so many different, we think about we're getting over COVID here at the house and how we need extra sleep when we are sick and our body needs sleep to heal and just for restorative purposes. And so we need extra sleep when we're not feeling well, and how important that can be. And sometimes it's a matter of mental exhaustion. You're caring for people, you're busy with all kinds of, there's
Mm.
extra stressors going on in your life. We often might need more sleep in those time periods when it's often harder to get more sleep because of everything going on. You have extra responsibilities happening, and finding a way to maybe those taking those little naps can be powerful. Even just you're parked in a parking lot somewhere, you set an alarm for 15 or 20 minutes and take a little power nap in the car or wherever you have that
Not at
opportunity.
a stoplight though. We don't want.
No, no, park at your park somewhere. So that's our podcast for today. We hope you've enjoyed it. We'd love to hear from you. Send us a comment, send us a message. Tell us what things have inspired you, have assisted you, what things you'd like to hear more about. We're here to guide you through your journey, caring for yourself and your aging loved ones, and reach out to us, see our website at focusedhealthyfamily.com, learn about the support that we can give you as you're caring for an aging loved one and juggling your own life journey, and learn more about EFT. Every Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, Don goes on Zoom, does a short free tapping session for anyone who'd like to join in, whether you're learning about EFT or you just like that benefit of being in a group setting and having someone to help guide you through it, because EFT is something you can do on your own, but having someone talk through it can also has such an added benefit to it, especially when you're new to learning it and even when you're experienced. You find us on Facebook at Focused Healthy Family, Instagram, Focused Healthy Family 1, YouTube. Again, you can watch us and all these podcasts at Focused Healthy Family, as well as listen to the podcast anywhere you listen to a podcast. Join us every Thursday when we air our podcast. We've got some upcoming interviews coming up. And be sure to check out prior podcasts. You can search the different topics, everything from caring for children, self care, aging loved ones, kind of the whole gamut of the lifespan. And as we navigate caring for ourselves and others. And remember, how you speak to your children and your loved ones today shapes their future and yours.